The morning sun barely touched the mountains surrounding Fort Carson, Colorado, when Staff Sergeant Rachel Morrison arrived at the base logistics office. At 32 years old, she'd spent 11 years in the Army, working her way up through supply chain management with quiet determination. She wasn't the loudest voice in any room, but her records were impeccable, her inventories always balanced to the penny. Rachel pulled her silver Civic into the parking lot, noticing immediately that someone had taken her usual spot. Again, she recognized the oversized black pickup truck. It belonged to Sergeant First Class Derek Paulson, who transferred in from Fort Hood 3 months ago. He seemed to take pleasure in small acts that made her days harder. Inside the building, she could already hear his voice echoing down the hallway. "I'm just saying," Derek announced to anyone within earshot, "back at Hood, we didn't have women running supply logistics. You need someone with actual field experience, not someone who counts pencils all day." Rachel took a slow breath and walked past the break room where Derek held court with two younger soldiers. She didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge the sudden silence that fell when she passed. She'd learned that engaging only made things worse. Her office was small but organized, shelves lined with manuals, a desk covered in requisition forms, and a single photo of her late father in his Vietnam-era uniform. Captain James Morrison had taught her that dignity came from doing your job well, not from defending yourself against small-minded people. "Morning, Rachel." She looked up to see Captain Linda Chen, one of the few officers who treated her with consistent respect. Linda was 40, career Army, and had seen enough to know competence when she saw it. "Morning, ma'am," Rachel replied, standing at ease. "I wanted to give you a heads up. Colonel Briggs is bringing in an outside consultant to review our supply chain efficiency. Some civilian contractor who's supposed to optimize our operations." Rachel felt something tighten in her chest. "When?" "Next week. I know your systems are solid, but you know how these things go. Fresh eyes, new perspectives, all that." Linda's expression softened. "Just be prepared for questions, and for Paulson to take credit for anything that goes right." After Linda left, Rachel sat down and pulled up her logistics database. Every item accounted for, every shipment tracked, every vehicle maintenance schedule color-coded and cross-referenced. She'd built this system from scratch, turning what had been a chaotic mess into a model of efficiency that other bases had started copying. But she knew how this would play. Derek would schmooze the consultant, talk about his combat deployments, make the work seem effortless. And she would be the quiet woman in the corner who just did data entry. The morning passed in routine tasks until the meeting at 1100 hours. Colonel Briggs had called all logistics personnel to the conference room. Rachel arrived early and took a seat near the back. Derek strutted in 10 minutes late, coffee in hand, and sat right up front. "All right, people," Colonel Briggs began. He was 55, a career officer who'd spent more time behind desks than in the field. "We've got a situation. The Inspector General's office will be conducting a surprise audit next month. Everything needs to be perfect. Morrison, I'm going to need a complete inventory report by Friday." Rachel nodded. "Yes, sir, I can have that ready." "And Paulson," the colonel continued, "I want you to oversee the vehicle maintenance records. Make sure everything is up to standard." Derek grinned. "You got it, sir. I'll whip those records into shape." Rachel bit her tongue. Those were her records. She'd been maintaining them for 3 years. But Derek had the colonel's ear now, had been taking him to lunch, playing golf with him on weekends. After the meeting, she returned to her office and found Derek already there, rifling through her filing cabinets. "Excuse me," she said firmly, "what are you doing?" He didn't even look up. "Colonel wants me on the maintenance records, just familiarizing myself with your system, if you can call it that. Those files are organized by date and vehicle classification. The digital records mirror the hard copies exactly." Derek finally turned to face her, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yeah, I'm sure they do. But the colonel wants someone with combat experience handling the important stuff now. No offense, Morrison, but you've never been deployed. You don't understand how things work in the real army." Heat rose in Rachel's face. She'd applied for deployment 3 times. Each time she'd been deemed essential personnel and kept stateside. It wasn't her fault, but Derek wielded it like a weapon. "I understand how logistics works," she said evenly. "And I understand that those records are accurate because I've maintained them personally. Well, now I'm maintaining them. So maybe spend your time on something more your speed. I hear they need help organizing the supply closets." Rachel stood frozen as Derek gathered an armful of her files and walked out. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back 11 years of frustration. That evening, Rachel drove to the small house she rented on the outskirts of Colorado Springs. It was a modest place, 2 bedrooms, a yard she never had time to maintain, and a mortgage she could barely afford on her salary. But it was hers. She changed out of her uniform and sat on the back porch with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sun set behind Pikes Peak. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother in Georgia. "How's my Army girl? Your daddy would be so proud." Rachel stared at the message for a long time before responding. Would he? Would he be proud of a daughter who let men like Derek walk all over her, who stayed silent when she should speak up? But she knew her father's lessons. "The work speaks for itself, Rachel. Do your job better than anyone else can, and eventually people notice." She'd been doing her job better than anyone else for 11 years. And still, men like Derek got promoted faster, got the choice assignments, got the respect she had to fight for every single day. The next morning, Rachel arrived an hour early. She wanted to make copies of all her maintenance records before Derek could claim them as his own work. But when she unlocked her office, she found the filing cabinets open and half empty. Her computer showed recent access, Derek's login credentials, timestamped at 0530. He'd copied everything, all her work, all her systems. Rachel sat down heavily in her chair. She could report this. She could go to Captain Chen, maybe even to Colonel Briggs himself. But what would she say? That a senior NCO had accessed files he'd been authorized to work on, that he'd used her systems exactly as they were designed to be used. She had no grounds for complaint, not officially. At the morning briefing, Derek presented his analysis of the vehicle maintenance program to Colonel Briggs and the visiting consultant, a crisp man in his 40s named Michael Hendricks who worked for a defense contractor. "As you can see," Derek explained, pointing to Rachel's color-coded spreadsheet projected on the wall, "I've developed a comprehensive tracking system that provides real-time status updates on every vehicle in our fleet." Rachel sat in the back, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth hurt. "Impressive," Hendricks said, making notes. "How long did this take you to implement?" "About 3 months of solid work," Derek replied without hesitation. "Had to build it from the ground up. The previous system was pretty much non-existent." A few people glanced at Rachel. Everyone in the room knew the truth, but no one said anything. "Morrison," Colonel Briggs called out. "You worked on this too, right, as Sergeant Paulson's assistant?" The word assistant landed like a slap. "I developed the original system, sir," Rachel said quietly. "Sergeant Paulson has been reviewing it." Right, the colonel waved dismissively. "Good teamwork. This is exactly what I like to see. Paulson, keep up the good work." After the meeting, Rachel walked quickly to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. She didn't cry. She'd learned long ago that tears solved nothing. But she needed a moment away from the smiling faces and the casual injustice. When she emerged, Captain Chen was waiting by the sinks. "That was your work," Linda said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "You should speak up." "And say what?" Rachel met her eyes in the mirror. "That I feel undermined, that I deserve credit. It makes me sound petty, and Paulson has the colonel's favor. I'm just the woman who counts pencils, remember?" Linda sighed. "Not to me, not to anyone who actually pays attention. Your work is solid, Rachel. Don't let them make you doubt that." But doubt was already creeping in. Rachel had spent her entire career trying to prove she belonged, trying to be good enough that gender didn't matter. And still, men like Derek could show up, take credit and advance while she stayed in place. That afternoon, she received an email from the Inspector General's office. The audit had been moved up. They'd be arriving in 2 weeks instead of 1 month. All personnel would be interviewed. All records would be examined. Rachel should have felt confident. Her records were perfect, but she knew Derek would take credit for anything that went right and blame her for anything that went wrong. She printed out the email and added it to her growing file of documentation. She'd learned to keep copies of everything, every email, every report, every performance review, just in case she ever needed to defend herself. The sun was setting when Rachel finally left the base. She drove through Colorado Springs, past the familiar landmarks, the Olympic Training Center, the Air Force Academy, the strip malls and chain restaurants that could have been anywhere in America. This was supposed to be her home. The Army was supposed to be her family. Instead, she felt like an outsider in both. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at her small house. Tomorrow, she'd get up and do it all again. She'd be professional, competent, invisible. She'd watch Derek take credit and Colonel Briggs nod approvingly, and the whole system grind on without noticing her. But tonight, for just a moment, Rachel let herself feel the weight of it all. The loneliness, the frustration, the exhaustion of fighting a battle that no one else seemed to see. A battle she was slowly losing. The 2 weeks before the Inspector General's audit passed in a blur of 18-hour days. Rachel worked through evenings and weekends, triple-checking every record, every invoice, every maintenance log. She knew the IG team would be thorough. They always were. One misplaced decimal point, one missing signature, and the whole logistics department would face scrutiny. Derek, meanwhile, spent his time in Colonel Briggs' office, strategizing about how to present their operations in the best possible light. Rachel watched him through the glass walls, laughing and gesturing while the colonel nodded along. "He's never even conducted an inventory," Rachel muttered to herself, cross-referencing a shipment of cold-weather gear against the requisition forms. Talking to yourself now. Rachel looked up to find Specialist Amy Vaughn, a 23-year-old soldier who'd been assigned to logistics fresh out of AIT. Amy was sharp, eager to learn, and one of the few people who seemed to appreciate Rachel's expertise. "Just thinking out loud," Rachel replied, managing a tired smile. "I finished reconciling the ammunition records," Amy said, handing over a thick folder. "Everything matches perfectly. Your system makes it really easy to track." "Thanks, Amy," added to the audit prep pile. The younger woman hesitated. "Sergeant Morrison, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you let Sergeant Paulson take credit for your work?" Rachel set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. It was a fair question. "Because fighting it would cost me more than it's worth. I'd be labeled as difficult, emotional, someone who can't work as part of a team." "That's not fair." "No," Rachel agreed. "It's not. But fairness isn't guaranteed, Amy, especially not for women in the military. You do your job, you document everything, and you hope that eventually the right people notice. And if they don't?" Rachel didn't have a good answer for that. The IG team arrived on a cold Monday morning in late February. There were 4 of them, 2 senior officers and 2 civilian auditors. They set up in a conference room and began systematically reviewing 3 years of logistics operations. Rachel was interviewed on the second day. The lead auditor, a stern lieutenant colonel named Patricia Webb, spent 2 hours asking detailed questions about inventory procedures, procurement protocols, and maintenance schedules. Your records are exceptional, Webb said, reviewing a printout. I've audited 37 bases in my career, and I've rarely seen this level of organization. Who designed this system? I did, ma'am, Rachel answered. Webb made a note. How long have you been running logistics here? 3 years for this specific position. 11 years in the Army overall. And Sergeant First Class Paulson, how long has he been involved? He transferred here 3 months ago, ma'am. Webb's eyebrow raised slightly, but she didn't comment further. She asked a few more technical questions, then dismissed Rachel with a nod of approval. Rachel allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would come out. That hope died the next afternoon. She was working in her office when she heard raised voices from the conference room. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was in trouble. Captain Chen appeared in her doorway, her face pale. Rachel, you need to come with me, now. The walk to the conference room felt like a march to execution. Inside, Colonel Briggs sat at the head of the table, his face red with anger. Derek stood off to the side, his arms crossed, looking smug. The IG team occupied the other side of the table. Staff Sergeant Morrison, Lieutenant Colonel Webb said formally. We've discovered a significant discrepancy in the vehicle maintenance records. Rachel's heart stopped. Ma'am. Webb pulled out a file. 3 Humvees are listed as fully operational and deployment-ready. However, physical inspection revealed that all 3 have critical mechanical failures that should have been flagged weeks ago. One has a cracked engine block. Another has brake lines that are nearly corroded through. These vehicles should never have been certified as ready. That's impossible, Rachel said, her mind racing. I personally reviewed those maintenance reports. That's the problem, Morrison, Colonel Briggs interrupted. You reviewed them. You certified them. Your signature is on the inspection forms. Rachel felt the room tilt. Sir, I need to see those forms. Webb slid the papers across the table. Rachel's hands trembled as she examined them. The signatures were hers or looked like hers, but the dates were wrong. The inspection schedules didn't match her records. These have been altered, she said quietly. That's a serious accusation, Derek spoke up for the first time. Are you saying someone forged your signature? I'm saying these aren't the forms I signed. The original inspections were conducted on different dates, and all 3 vehicles were flagged for maintenance. I have the documentation. We've seen your documentation, Webb interrupted. These are the official forms in the permanent record, the forms with your signature. Rachel looked at Derek. He met her gaze with an expression of false concern that made her stomach turn. He'd done this. Somehow, he'd switched the forms, made it look like she'd approved unsafe vehicles. There must be copies, Rachel insisted. I keep digital backups of everything. We've reviewed the digital records, Webb said. They match these forms exactly. Because Derek had access to her computer. He'd copied everything, and he could have altered everything. This is a serious breach of protocol, Colonel Briggs said heavily. Those vehicles could have been deployed. Soldiers could have been killed because of your negligence. Sir, with all respect, I did not certify those vehicles as ready. Someone has tampered with my records. Enough, the colonel slammed his hand on the table. I'm suspending you from duty, effective immediately, pending a formal investigation. You'll surrender your access credentials and remain available for questioning. The room spun. Rachel gripped the edge of the table. Colonel, please, if you'll just let me show you my personal backups. Your personal backups aren't official documentation. The IG team has made their findings clear. You're dismissed, Sergeant. Rachel stood on shaking legs. She looked at Captain Chen, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the IG team, their faces impassive. She looked at Derek, who had the decency to glance away. Yes, sir, she whispered. She walked out of that conference room with her head high. even though everything inside her was crumbling. She went to her office, packed her personal items into a cardboard box, and turned in her badge and computer access card to the security desk. The drive home was a blur. Rachel didn't remember getting on the highway, didn't remember parking in her driveway. She sat in her car as the sun set, holding a cardboard box full of 11 years of her life. Her phone rang, her mother. Rachel couldn't answer it, couldn't explain, couldn't admit that she'd failed. Inside her house, she set the box on the kitchen table and stood in the silence. The formal investigation would take weeks, maybe months. They'd interview everyone, review everything. And in the end, it would be her word against the official record. Her word against Derek's charm and Colonel Briggs' bias. She'd lose, she knew she'd lose. The Army would separate her with a general discharge, not quite honorable, not quite dishonorable. She'd lose her benefits, her career, her identity. And Derek would get a commendation for identifying the systemic failures in the logistics department. Rachel walked to her father's photo on the mantel. Captain James Morrison stared back at her in his dress uniform, young and proud, and convinced that the Army was a place where merit mattered. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "I tried." The next morning, Rachel woke to find her story on the local news. Not by name. They couldn't use her name during an investigation, but everyone would know. Fort Carson logistics officer suspended after safety violations, the headline read. Her phone began buzzing with texts, friends asking if she was okay, a few cruel messages from anonymous numbers calling her incompetent, one from Amy Vaughn, "I know you didn't do this, I believe you." But belief wasn't evidence, and evidence had been manufactured against her. Rachel spent the day in a haze, alternating between rage and despair. She pulled out every personal backup she had, USB drives, email archives, even old notebooks with handwritten entries. She built a timeline of every inspection, every maintenance request, every interaction with Derek. It was thorough, it was comprehensive, it was probably useless. Because the official record told a different story, and in the Army, the official record was truth. On the third day, Captain Chen called. "Rachel, I need you to come to my office, off base. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on Academy Boulevard?" An hour later, Rachel slid into a booth across from Linda. The captain looked like she hadn't slept. "I shouldn't be talking to you," Linda said quietly, "but I can't just watch this happen. Paulson altered those records, I'm sure of it." "Can you prove it?" "No, he's smart. He covered his tracks, but I've been going through the backup server logs and there are access patterns that don't make sense. Late-night logins from his credentials, bulk file modifications, timestamps that don't align with when he was supposedly off base." Rachel leaned forward. "That's evidence. It's circumstantial, and the colonel won't listen to me. He's convinced you made a mistake and are trying to cover it up by blaming Paulson." "So what do I do?" Linda hesitated. "There's someone you should talk to. He doesn't work on base anymore, but he has experience with situations like this. His name is Marcus Chen, my brother. He retired as a Navy SEAL about 5 years ago." "What can a SEAL do about paperwork fraud?" "Marcus doesn't just know combat. He knows how institutions work, how to fight from the outside when the inside is rigged against you. He's helped other soldiers before." Quietly. Linda slid a piece of paper across the table with a phone number. "Call him. Tell him I sent you. He lives up in Monument, runs a security consulting business and trains military working dogs. He's good people, Rachel. He'll help if he can." Rachel stared at the number. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're a good soldier. Because what's happening to you is wrong. And because I'm tired of watching women get pushed out of the Army for crimes they didn't commit while men like Paulson get promoted." That evening, Rachel sat on her porch with her phone in hand, staring at the number Linda had given her. What did she have to lose? Her career was already over. Her reputation was destroyed. She dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a deep, calm voice answered. Chen. Mr. Chen, my name is Rachel Morrison. Your sister Linda gave me your number. She said you might be able to help me. There was a pause. Is this about Fort Carson? Yes, sir. I've been following the news, and Linda filled me in on some details. Why don't you come up to Monument tomorrow morning? We'll talk. Bring all your documentation. I don't have money for a lawyer or... I'm not a lawyer, Sergeant Morrison, and I don't want your money. Just bring your records and be ready to tell me everything. We'll figure out the rest. Rachel felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Hoping. Thank you, sir. What time? 0900. I'll text you the address. After she hung up, Rachel sat in the gathering darkness and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that maybe this wasn't over, that maybe someone would finally listen, that maybe she could fight back. But even as hope flickered to life, doubt remained. She'd been fighting for 11 years, and she'd always lost in the end. Why should this time be any different? Rachel drove north on I-25 toward Monument as the sun climbed over the mountains. The small town sat nestled between Colorado Springs and Denver, a quiet community of about 8,000 people who valued privacy and space. The address Marcus Chen had texted led her off the main highway, down a winding road, and finally to a property set back from the street, a modest ranch-style house with a large fenced yard and several outbuildings. As she parked, Rachel heard barking, not aggressive but alert, professional. The front door opened before she could knock. Marcus Chen was 47 years old, with close-cropped graying hair and the kind of calm intensity that came from decades of disciplined training. He wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt, but he moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent his life in high-stakes environments. Sergeant Morrison, he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. Come in, coffee. Yes, sir, thank you. Just Marcus, I'm retired, remember. The house was neat and sparsely decorated. A few photos on the walls showing SEAL teams in various locations, a rack of challenge coins, some military plaques. But what dominated the space was the massive German Shepherd lying on a dog bed near the fireplace. The dog's head came up as Rachel entered. His ears were alert, his dark eyes intelligent and assessing. That's Apollo, Marcus said, handing Rachel a mug of coffee. Retired military working dog. He was a combat tracker in Afghanistan, saved my unit's lives more than once. Apollo stood and walked over to Rachel, sniffing her carefully. She remained still, letting him complete his assessment. After a moment, he sat and looked up at Marcus. He likes you, Marcus said. He's a good judge of character. Now tell me everything. Start from the beginning. For the next 2 hours, Rachel laid out the entire story. She showed him her documentation, the backup files, the timeline, the email exchanges, the server logs Linda had provided. Marcus listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a legal pad. When she finished, he sat back and studied her. You know what you're up against? Yes, sir. Yes. I'm up against a system that's already decided I'm guilty, against an officer who has the colonel's favor and knows how to work the politics, against my own naivety in thinking that doing good work would be enough. Marcus nodded slowly. My sister says you're one of the best logistics officers she's ever worked with. She also says you've been systematically undermined for months, and that this setup with the maintenance records is just the final move. That's accurate. The formal investigation will take 8 to 12 weeks. During that time, Paulson will continue building his narrative. He'll find other people to blame you for other problems. By the time the investigation concludes, your reputation will be so damaged that even if you're technically cleared, you'll never recover your career. Rachel felt her last bit of hope dying. So you're saying I'm finished? I'm saying the conventional approach won't work. You can't fight this through official channels because the official channels are compromised. Then what do I do? Marcus leaned forward. You fight dirty. Not illegal, not unethical, but unconventional. You find evidence they can't ignore and you make it public in a way they can't suppress. I don't have evidence. Paulson erased it. Nothing is ever fully erased. And people like Paulson always make mistakes because they're arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else. We just need to find the mistake. How? Marcus smiled. That's where Apollo and I come in. I still have friends on base, people who owe me favors, and I have skills that don't appear on any official resume. Give me a few days to do some reconnaissance. Rachel wanted to believe him. But years of disappointment had taught her caution. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. 3 reasons. First, my sister asked me to, and I trust Linda's judgment. Second, I don't like bullies, and Paulson is a bully. Third, he paused, his expression darkening. I had a teammate once, female combat medic, one of the toughest people I've ever known. She got railroaded out of the Navy by a senior officer who felt threatened by her competence. By the time she came to me for help, it was too late. She got a general discharge, lost her benefits, spiraled into depression. She killed herself 2 years later. The words hung in the air between them. I'm sorry, Rachel whispered. So am I didn't help her when I could have. I won't make that mistake again. Rachel felt tears welling up, the first she'd allowed herself since this nightmare began. I don't want to die, Marcus, but I don't know how to keep fighting when everything feels hopeless. Then let me fight for you until you're strong enough to fight for yourself. Deal. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Good, now go home. Don't talk to anyone from the base. Don't post anything on social media. Don't do anything except wait for my call. Can you do that? Yes. And Rachel, this isn't over, not by a long shot. The next 3 days were the longest of Rachel's life. She stayed in her house, ignoring phone calls, jumping at every sound. Her mother called 6 times before Rachel finally answered and gave her a sanitized version of events. Her mother cried, said she'd drive up from Georgia, said Rachel's father would have known what to do. Rachel wasn't so sure anymore. On the 4th morning, Marcus called. I need you to come back up to Monument and bring your dress uniform. When Rachel arrived, she found Marcus in one of his outbuildings, a climate-controlled space filled with computer equipment that looked far more sophisticated than anything she'd seen on base. What is all this? She asked. Tools of the trade. I do security consulting for defense contractors. Part of that involves testing their digital security systems. Legal, authorized, but very thorough. He gestured to a screen showing lines of code. I've been analyzing those server logs Linda gave you. She was right. There are anomalies. Paulson logged in remotely after midnight on 3 occasions in January, always from off base. Each time he accessed your maintenance database. Can you prove he altered the records? Not definitively. He's smarter than that. But here's what I can prove. He accessed the backup server from a coffee shop in Colorado Springs, one that keeps security camera footage for 90 days. I have a friend who works there. We pulled the footage from those 3 nights. Marcus pulled up a video file. It showed Derek sitting at a laptop, his face clearly visible, the timestamp matching the server logs exactly. That proves he was accessing the system, Marcus continued. But it doesn't prove he was altering files, so I dug deeper. Paulson isn't just corrupt, he's greedy. I found evidence of other scams. Small-scale procurement fraud, kickbacks from contractors. Nothing huge, but all traceable. Rachel's heart began to race. How did you find this? Let's just say I have friends in the contracting community who have noticed irregularities in Fort Carson's procurement. Bids being awarded to companies that shouldn't have won. Invoices that don't quite add up. All of it started right around the time Paulson transferred in. That's fraud, real fraud, not just career politics. Exactly. And fraud brings in the Criminal Investigation Command, not just the IG. CID doesn't care about Colonel Briggs' golf buddies. They care about evidence. So what do we do? Marcus handed her a USB drive. This contains everything I've found: server logs, security footage, procurement records, contractor statements. You're going to take this directly to the CID office in Colorado Springs, not on base, the civilian office. Ask for Special Agent Sarah Rodriguez. She's expecting you. You already contacted them. I made some inquiries through back channels. Rodriguez is straight arrow, can't be influenced by base politics. She's interested in what we have, but it needs to come from you. You're the victim here. You're the one filing the complaint. Rachel stared at the USB drive. This could work. This could actually work. It's a start. But Rachel, you need to understand something. Even if we prove Paulson is corrupt, even if we clear your name completely, the army might not welcome you back. You've made powerful people look foolish. Colonel Briggs will never forgive that. I don't care about Briggs. I care about my honor, about the truth. Good, then let's get you that truth. Rachel met with Special Agent Rodriguez that afternoon in a nondescript office building in downtown Colorado Springs. Rodriguez was in her mid-30s, former Army MP, and she listened to Rachel's story with the intensity of someone who'd heard too many similar tales. "This is substantial," Rodriguez said, reviewing the evidence. "I'm opening a formal investigation effective immediately. This will take precedence over the IG audit findings. You'll need to make yourself available for interviews, and I'll need you to document every interaction you've had with Sergeant Paulson." "I have documentation," Rachel said, pulling out her files. "Everything." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "Of course you do. All right, Sergeant Morrison, let me make some calls. In the meantime, you stay away from Fort Carson. Don't talk to anyone involved. Paulson doesn't know we're onto him yet, and I'd like to keep it that way." For the first time in weeks, Rachel felt like she could breathe. But that feeling lasted exactly 2 days. She was grocery shopping when her phone rang. Amy Vaughn, the young specialist from logistics. "Sergeant Morrison, you need to know something. Paulson is telling everyone you're going to be arrested. He says you've been running your own procurement scam, skimming money from contractors. He says CID is building a case against you." Rachel nearly dropped her phone. "That's not true, that's not." "I know it's not true, but he's very convincing, and the colonel is backing him up. They're saying you're trying to frame Paulson because you know you're guilty." The world tilted again. Derek was smart. He knew CID was investigating, and he was getting ahead of it by flipping the narrative, making himself the whistleblower and her the criminal. "Amy, thank you for telling me, but I need you to be careful. If Paulson thinks you're on my side." "I don't care what he thinks. You're a good person, Sergeant. You deserve better than this." After hanging up, Rachel sat in her car in the parking lot and tried not to panic. She called Marcus. "He's running a preemptive strike," Marcus said after she explained. "Classic manipulation. But here's the thing, he's making it worse for himself. Every lie he tells, every false accusation, it all goes in the CID report. And Rodriguez is good at her job. She won't be fooled." "But what if people believe him? What if by the time the truth comes out, everyone already thinks I'm a criminal? Then we make sure the truth comes out loud enough that no one can ignore it." That night Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 3 months, every small humiliation, every dismissal, every time she'd stayed silent when she should have spoken up. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "The work speaks for itself." But what if the work wasn't enough? What if doing the right thing, being competent, following the rules, what if none of it mattered when people had already decided you didn't belong? At 3 in the morning, Rachel got up and walked to her kitchen table. She pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. Not a resignation letter, not a suicide note, but something else. A promise to herself. I will not quit. I will not break. I will not let them make me believe I'm less than I am. Even if I lose everything, I will lose it fighting. I will lose it standing up. I will lose it with my dignity intact. She signed it, dated it, and pinned it to her refrigerator where she'd see it every morning. Because Rachel Morrison had spent 11 years being the quiet professional, the one who didn't make waves, the one who absorbed the insults and did her job and hoped it would be enough. It hadn't been enough. But maybe, just maybe, fighting back would be. 2 weeks later, Rachel stood in her living room in her dress uniform, preparing for the CID interview that would determine her future. Marcus had called that morning with news. They'd found more evidence, stronger connections, a pattern of fraud that went back to Derek's time at Fort Hood. But they'd also found something else. Witness statements from soldiers who'd served with Derek before. Stories of other careers destroyed, other scapegoats, other women who'd been pushed out. Rachel wasn't the first, she was just the latest. That changes the investigation, Marcus had explained. This isn't about one incident anymore. It's about a pattern of corruption. Rodriguez is bringing in additional agents. They're going to do this right. Rachel looked at herself in the mirror, her uniform crisp, her bearing military, her expression calm. She looked like a soldier who belonged in that uniform. No matter what anyone else said. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Praying for you, baby girl. Your daddy is watching over you. Rachel touched the photo of her father on her way out the door. I'm fighting, Daddy, just like you taught me. The CID office was busy when she arrived. Rodriguez met her at the door with a professional smile. Ready, Sergeant? Yes, ma'am. Good, because we have some people who want to hear your story. People who have the authority to make this right. Rodriguez led her to a conference room where 3 people waited, 2 CID agents and a Colonel Rachel didn't recognize. He stood when she entered, and she came to attention. At ease, Sergeant Morrison. I'm Colonel James Hartford from the Inspector General's office in Washington. I've been reviewing your case personally. Rachel's pulse quickened. Washington. This had gone all the way to Washington. Yes, sir. I've read your service record. I've reviewed the evidence Special Agent Rodriguez has gathered, and I've spoken with people who have served with you over your 11-year career. I want you to know something before we begin this interview. He paused, his expression serious but not unkind. You should never have been put in this position. The system failed you, and I'm here to make sure that failure is corrected, so I want you to tell us everything, Sergeant, every detail, every suspicion, every moment you felt undermined or threatened. We're listening, and this time we're actually going to do something about it. Rachel felt something crack open inside her chest, not breaking, but opening, like a door that had been locked for 11 years finally swinging wide. Yes, sir, she said, her voice steady and strong. I'll tell you everything. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Rachel Morrison truly believed that maybe, just maybe, justice was possible after all.